What's up, guys? My name is Amy Villarini. Welcome to my podcast, Dear Athletes. For those who don't know me, I am a former Division I track and field sprinter from the University of Buffalo, where I specialized in the 400 and 200 meter sprints. I now am a personal trainer in Buffalo, New York, helping current athletes improve performance and encouraging others to train the athlete that they are. This podcast is a space for athletes to share their experiences outside of the sport itself. There's a lot that goes on behind closed doors within the life of an athlete, a lot of which can be really heavy to carry alone. The culture of athletics teaches us to bottle our emotions and to basically move past them. We're told that experiencing these things can sometimes be a distraction or even a sign of weakness. I wanted to create a space for us to find strength in our experiences, both alone and together as a community of athletes. Talking about these things openly not only gives us the opportunity to heal ourselves, but to also heal each other. I personally believe that we are only as strong as our mind, body, and spirit is all combined. And so in a space where we give so much attention to our body, it's time for us to start giving a little bit more attention to both the mind and the spirit. In this podcast, we will hear from a multitude of athletes from around the world, from different experiences, different sports, different backgrounds. We will hear about the experiences that have not only shaped them within their sport, but as people outside of their sport as well. Many of us carry the experiences that we went through during our time of an athlete far beyond our careers. And this can be really hard to navigate, especially alone. So my hope is that in talking about our own experiences and also hearing about each other's, we're able to see how connected we really are. Additionally, there's also a lot of differences between coaches and athletes, and that can sometimes lead to a big disconnect between those two positions. That disconnect has, I'm sure many of you know, created a lot of trauma, a lot of misunderstanding, and a lot of pain. And so my goal and my hope is that this conversation can kind of help us to mend those types of relationships that don't need to go bad. So let's get into it. We're going to start this podcast by going through my experience and how it basically inspired me to start this podcast with you guys. What inspired me to start this podcast was essentially how the relationship with myself had changed once I hung up my spikes and ended my career as a track and field athlete. Ending my competitive athletic career was a huge challenge to both my sense of identity and sense of value. I'm somebody who grew up in sports literally from the day that I could walk. Growing up, I was always highly competitive in both soccer and track, which most people don't really know about the soccer thing, but that was my first love. But I also played basketball, I skied and snowboarded, and I also ran cross country for a little bit. So sports was a huge part of my growing up, and it just continued and never stopped. So what that means is not only was I always just playing a sport, but I was constantly always working towards a specific goal. And subconsciously, what that had basically taught me was that I was only as valuable as the accomplishments that I made within that sport that I was playing at the time. So sports turned into not just something that I loved, but it was also a huge piece of my identity. So track came into my life during a time where I was really struggling mentally. I really needed a pick-me-up. I just needed basically a win. And it was something I started casually. And then as I was moving through the sport, I realized that I was really good at it. And it helped me to see myself in a better light. And with that being said, it, like I said, subconsciously created an identity that was tied directly into track and my accomplishments within track, because as I did better, I started to feel better about myself. In most ways, I have always been really proud to have track as a piece of my identity. I've always respected the sport. I've always respected people within the sport. And so to have that as a piece of me, I was so proud, and I still am. But at some point, I realized that there are ways that having an identity so deeply rooted in track was more damaging than good to me. I realized I started using track without even knowing as basically a crutch for me to be able to see myself in a positive light and to see my self-value and my self-worth. It was directly tied into not only just playing the sport, but doing well in it. Not only was track an identity that I saw in myself, but an identity that other people credited me for too. And so anywhere I went, I was always either known as Amy the track girl or Amy the fast one. And in every sport that I played, that was my thing. Like, everybody knew me as the girl who was fast. That's what I was celebrated for. That's what people talked to me about all the time. People asked me about it all the time. It's what I was always working for. And so walking into life now and having to be just Amy, I didn't even know what that meant at the time. Especially growing up, from the moment that you basically can walk and up until, for me at least, it was when I was 23 is when I ended my career. You, in those years, develop such a strong sense of who you are. And those developmental years are just like so essential for knowing who you are, developing who you are, and like just becoming more of who you are. And all of a sudden at 23, that sense of identity is completely gone. I didn't feel like I had a right to identify as that anymore because I was no longer competing in it. I was no longer wearing the jersey for it. And so I felt like I was no longer able to wear that identity. And in situations where I would walk into a space and say like, I'm Amy, I run track at UB, I now was just, I'm Amy, and then I didn't know what to say after that. I didn't have anything to put my name next to. I didn't have anything to identify with. And because up until that point, all I had ever done was identify myself, not to people, but to myself as an athlete, I didn't have anything else to kind of have a crutch on, or I didn't have anything else to essentially feel like myself in. So now walking into life just as Amy, with no title after that, I felt a lot of uncomfortable feelings. In some ways, in most ways, I felt lost. In a lot of ways, I felt uncelebrated. I felt unaccomplished. I felt unimportant, insignificant. I didn't have a purpose. And in a lot of ways, something that was hard for me to even admit to was disappointed in myself. Simply because I had always seen myself. I remember the day that I decided I loved track. And I just saw these Olympic runners doing amazing things, and I wanted to be that. And so to end your career after college, if you're a track athlete, you know that to be the top of the top is one of the hardest things that you can do. But still, as a little girl, nurturing that passion and nurturing that goal and that dream, to see it come to an end was one of the hardest things that I had gone through, and it still chokes me up today to even talk about it or even think about it. One of the things that I absolutely had never expected to have a feeling of a lack of confidence in was going to the gym. Regardless of my athletic career, I've always been a part of a fit family. Like we always worked out. We were always active. If we weren't playing sports, we were doing something active regardless. And so being in the gym was always something that I was super confident in. I never felt lost in, and I could go in a gym and put together a workout for myself any day of the week. But I didn't realize that when I did that as an athlete, that those goals were always in mind. There was never a time where I just went into the gym without even a small thought of how is this going to help me get better at my sport. And so walking into the gym as a non-athlete or a non-competing athlete at the time, I didn't have a goal anymore. I didn't have the goal to get faster or the goal to whatever it was. And so I remember going into the gym in a space like I'm always so confident in. I had no idea what to do. I was doing sprint drills in the middle of the gym, and I was like probably looking crazy because what are you doing sprint drills in the gym? And I wasn't training for anything. So yeah, it was a very hard place to navigate, and that was not something that I expected for it to be a challenge. Another thing that was really hard for me to experience was the abrupt shift in my relationships, both within the sport and outside of the sport itself. So personal relationships and athletic relationships too. The abrupt change in the relationship with my coach, I remember, was a big shock for me. These are people who help you hold your passion. These are people who you basically look to for everything while you're competing, because you trust that they're going to help you to accomplish your most intimate goals in a dream that you've nurtured since you were a kid. And when your career ends, you know that it's okay, but it still hurts to know that you're walking away and leaving something behind, and your coaches are just picking up and going on to the next. And if you're anything like me, your sport was, like I said a million times, one of the most important things to you. And so the people who helped you to achieve your goals naturally became some of the most important people to you. And they have so many different athletes that they have to tend to outside of just you. But seeing that shift when you walk out of your sport and there's no longer a connection, or there's no longer the relationship that you have with your coach, I remember that was something that I felt like I was mourning a lot, and I didn't have the right to kind of go and talk about it because I know that they had other things that they were working towards. The season was ended, but they're on to the next. And so my season was ended and I didn't know where to go. And so I felt that shift really aggressively, and these people that I had trusted and just helped me so much in my careers. It felt like, and I know this is wrong, but it felt like I was not as important as what I had thought that I was at the time. And I think that's just a natural shift that happens within your athletic career, because your coaches have to move on, your coaches have to keep going forward, and you have to start navigating a life outside of that sport and outside of them. So regardless, it's a hard thing to go through, and I don't think I was ever prepared for that. I didn't even expect myself to be affected by it. Another shift that I realized soon after I finished my career was a shift in my personal relationships. So the relationships with my friends and my family primarily. Since everybody knew me as a competing athlete or a track athlete, they always knew that I had a competition coming up or that I was training for something specific. And so I would always get questions of, how are you feeling? How are you doing? People would just text me, call me, just ask me how I was doing in that moment in time. And when I stopped competing, naturally people stopped asking those questions as frequently, because people weren't wondering my state in regards to how I would impact my next competition. And so although I know that there was no harm there, it was just the absence of those questions. I kind of felt it. And in a time where I was questioning my value and my identity, seeing a shift in people kind of regarding my everyday well-being, it felt like it kind of fed into that questioning of my value. And so for a little bit of time, that was something that I had struggled with, but I definitely got through it. I just had to talk myself through those times to know that it wasn't other people questioning my value. It was just still me questioning my own value. So as I continued out through my days and navigating this new space, I started to realize that I didn't know what to submerge myself in anymore. I didn't know that I could simply just be Amy and that would be okay, or just to exist. I didn't know how to just exist and not to constantly have a goal that you're working towards, or have a passion that's driving you to do certain things every day. And always working towards something you're passionate about and always working towards a goal, every day becomes very fulfilled by that sense of purpose. And so I was struggling to feel fulfilled in my everyday life in just simply just existing. And so finding something or finding fulfillment in simplicity was really, really a foreign concept to me. I didn't understand it. I thought you had to be great to be valued. And so, or you had to be great, or you had to be working towards something great to be fulfilled. And so that was something that I also had to try to navigate and understand as I was just going through life. So all in all, during that first year of me walking away from my sport or just ending my career, there were a lot of overbearing, intense emotions, and I ended up having to get a therapist to work through them. I didn't at first know that all the things that I was experiencing emotionally during that time was related to the ending of my career, but as I was moving through therapy and moving through my own self-talk and my own relationship with God and myself, I realized that the root of a lot of my emotional problems that I was going through at the time was a direct correlation to ending my career. And so I started questioning if I was the only one going through this. I thought there was other people around me or other teammates that ended at the same time I did, and you don't see the things that you're going through internally out on social media or in somebody's external life. You don't see those things. And so you know that, but you don't always understand it as you see it. And so I saw people that were in a similar phase of life as I was, looking like it wasn't even a thing. They weren't mourning the loss of a piece of them the same way that I was. And so I started talking about it with some of my friends, some of my clients, some of my athletes, some of just people around. And I realized that in a lot of ways our experiences are very parallel to each other. And then on top of that, we all have our own individual experiences as athletes that have been hard for us to hold, that are so different from each other. And although that a conversation I have with one person, our experiences can be different, I know that that same person can have a conversation with somebody else and they might share very similar experiences. And so it kind of opened me up to the knowingness that there is so much that goes on in athletics that we just hold in our own heads and we don't really share with anybody. And it's really shaped by the mindset within the world of sports. We just have to push forward and get past it. There's not a whole lot of time for us to address these issues or to be comforted in them because we're always preparing for something next, and we always are told to put on a strong face and essentially just go perform and to not mess up. But in me talking to my friends and the people around me, I realized that I was feeling comfort from knowing that other people have shared experiences with me. And so in a way that helped me to start heal, because I was in a lot of ways ashamed of talking about these things because I felt like talking about them identified the fact that I saw myself as a failure or I saw myself as less valuable, and I didn't want to give people that image of myself by me sharing these feelings with them. And so I kept that to myself for a long time, but when I started sharing these experiences, I realized that other people did too. And because other people were experiencing these things too, they comforted me in the fact that I know that if I don't see these people as less valuable, I don't see these people as insignificant or failures. And so if we can share the same experience and I can see them in a positive light, then I should be able to see myself in that same light too. And that's where the inspiration of this podcast kind of was birthed. So since I knew that this was a massive process for me to get through, and then I was brought aware of the fact that other people also are experiencing this, I wanted to kind of give the opportunity for other people to heal as well. I know not everybody is always comfortable talking about the things that are really vulnerable to them. And I also know that a lot of people don't have the words to be able to describe everything that they go through, especially in athletics, especially with men in athletics. You guys have the double standard of not talking about things just because you're a man, but also because you're an athlete. And so I just wanted to be a voice and a set of ears for people and an opportunity for people to start sharing their experiences. And hear if you're not comfortable sharing your own experience, you can hear other people, and hearing another person's experience might give you the words to describe your own, but also the comfort to know that you're not alone in what you're experiencing. As we know, athletics is a huge space of competition. We only know how to compete with each other. Even if you're on the same team, we just know to compete with each other because you're competing for a position, or you're competing to be the number one spot, competing to be a captain, whatever it is. We always know competition, whether it's within the team or opposing teams. And as I started thinking about this, I wanted to create a space where we're not in competition with each other. I think a lot of times too, athletes are really misunderstood by the people on the outside. There's a lot that goes into this entire community and this entire environment that people don't see. They just see us as people who perform and put on a show, essentially. And the truth is there's a lot more that goes on behind it. And the concept of coming together and helping each other heal and to work with each other rather than against each other to make each other feel seen in a space where we might not always be seen by the people outside of us, I thought was a beautiful concept and something that I wish I kind of had as I was an athlete, as I was competing, so that it wasn't as scary of a topic to start talking about these things within your teammates or within your competition. I believe that creating a openness and acceptance of a softness and gentleness within sports isn't a sign of weakness, but it's going to help to empower us to get better within our sports. Also change the environment of athletics so that in a lot of ways it's easier on us as humans rather than just people in a jersey. And I think that a lot of times when we talk about the issues that go on within athletics, we a lot of times point our fingers at the people in charge of the organizations. And the truth is those people are probably not going to make the shift because they're not the ones experiencing the things that we're experiencing. And so to start within ourselves and to create a team from every person, every athlete that is competing or every athlete that was competing, to create this new team and to come together and to understand each other and to support each other and to shift the environment within athletics will kind of guide the structure of the environment of athletics as a whole as we get more comfortable being both soft and aggressive in a space where we're truly just trying to nurture a passion that we developed when we were a young kid. We can't forget that although we are athletes, we're number one humans first. And if we give credit to our humanness, then I think that the things that stem from that and the gifts that we have and the talents that we were given, those all will just become even stronger and flourish even more in our sport as we find balance in our life and move in a more holistic direction. So I'm really excited to start this podcast and to hear from you guys, to start developing new relationships with athletes from around the world, to start to see each other in a different light, and to basically create a new team of athletes that we're always, like I said, we're always working against each other, but a new team that we're cohesively and harmoniously working together towards the same goal. I'm really excited to see where this goes. I hope that it brings on a lot of healing with you guys. I also am hoping that it brings on a lot of healing within myself. And I can't wait to learn from your experiences and to learn within myself more about me as I talk more and hear more from you guys. So I'm excited for you guys to start with me. I hope you guys tune in.